they hired me to work at the front desk of the Contemporary Resort. And
Well, everybody's got to start somewhere, right? Walt Disney sends the
yeah,
black
right, right.
helicopters, right?
Black Ops from Disney. I keep waiting, that I'm going to get like called out someday of being like, oh, you fraud, but hasn't happened yet. So,
Well, it won't happen because of this show, I can assure you. Guys, I'm super excited for my next guest on the Ripple Effect podcast. His name is Brian Collins, and he is a former Walt Disney Imagineer. What's an Imagineer? Well, think of anybody who creates the magic at the parks. That's what an Imagineer is. They create the rides, they create the scenery, they create the robotics, they create all of the unique experiences that you see out there in the world of Disney. I'm so excited to have Brian join me today. As I said, he's a former Walt Disney Imagineer. He's a futurist and global innovation consultant, an expert in immersive environments and emerging technologies, full-time instructor at the University of Central Florida, and an entrepreneur. Believe it or not, guys, Brian Collins will actually take you on a behind the scenes tour at Walt Disney World so you can see how the magic actually happens. I can't wait to dig into this. I am like a kid in the candy store today with Brian as our guest. So, with no further ado, let's dive in. Guys, I am super excited to be with Brian Collins. Brian, welcome to the Ripple Effect podcast. How are
thank
you
you.
doing
I'm doing
today?
wonderful. Thank you. Just got home from campus.
I Well, yeah. So you're a professor at the University of Central
I
Florida,
am.
yeah?
Yep. Yep. Among other things in my repertoire, but yes.
Yeah. Is there nothing that you don't do? When I look at everything you're doing, I don't know when you
Yeah.
sleep.
Well. Yeah. Yeah.
What specifically are you teaching at the university, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, so my background actually, and I guess maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this, but my background, I began as a Walt Disney Imagineer. And so I was writing bad jokes for the Jungle Cruise and scripts and spiels for the different attractions and things like that. And I've always been very involved in the themed entertainment industry, obviously. Later on, I got involved in new and emerging technologies and doing some really cool stuff with that. And so now at UCF, I'm a instructor where I'm teaching the next generation of future theme park designers, how to
Wow.
create immersive environments and rides and attractions and live events and all kinds of really cool stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of cool because I saw on LinkedIn that you know Aaron Riley, who teaches at the University of
Yes.
Texas, and my son graduated from her
Oh, no
program
way.
last
Yeah.
May.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So, the immersive experiences, I mean, it's maybe for our audience, maybe you could share a little bit about that from your perspective and what you're preparing this
Oh
next
my gosh.
generation of workforce to focus on.
I was just talking about this morning with one of my colleagues, how I think we're just in a period of technological innovation and transformation like I've never seen before. When you look at where things have gone with generative AI, and chat GPT, things like that, right? Artificial intelligence.
Yep.
We're just like, right now in like hyperdrive. It's wonderful and crazy. Um, so, I mean, a lot of my courses really kind of focus on how you can take a lot of these new and emerging technologies. And I kind of also obviously blend that with my background as an Imagineer. And when we talk about immersive environments, how to tap into someone's senses at every level. And it's not just for entertainment, you're starting to see more and more immersive environments. When I say immersive environments, you've got really kind of like now you've got two versions of that. You've got the physical immersive environments like a Disney ride or attraction when you go on, the
Yep.
Jungle Cruise or Haunted Mansion, right? Or you've got now virtual with AR and VR. Artificial intelligence now is making that even more immersive. And so, how do you really connect with people and, kind of tell your stories the way, you want to tell them? Kind of putting on my Imagineers hat, I guess, but, that's one thing that is kind of like, I think, driven into our DNA is everything at Disney starts with a story. What's the story we
Yeah.
want to tell? And it's not a once upon a time kind of story. It's really, when Imagineers talk about story, it's really that creative blueprint that we
Yep.
create that dictates everything from the architecture and the colors and the sounds and the costumes and even the merchandise, just everything. So I think our society and our culture, and not just here in the U.S., but around the world, we're starting to see more and more of these immersive experiences and environments kind of pop up. So
Yep.
um, you know, a lot of people have heard about, like, a while ago, one of the first big ones that was traveling around was the Van Gogh exhibit, right? That where you would go
Yep.
in and there was all this projection mapping on the walls and you were just surrounded by his artwork and things like that. And now, it's kind of gone even beyond that. But so entertainment is just one area where uh, uh, certainly people are experiencing these immersive environments. Meow Wolf, another great
Yep.
company out there in England. There's a place called Phantom Peak. That's a wonderful experience. But even like in the medical field, let's say, or in uh, uh, education, right? Non-traditional places that didn't necessarily always maybe embrace or know how to embrace, or weren't given the opportunity to embrace immersive environments, are
Yeah.
now seeing the value in what that can bring. And there's just some wonderful, wonderful things. I've worked on some amazing projects in education and healthcare and things like that. And um, it's, especially like senior care now, all the baby boomers like myself, who are starting to get up there, are just, it's, I don't know. I sound like I'm babbling just because I get so dang excited, kind of talking about
Yeah.
this and seeing how all these different dots are connecting. It's wonderful.
Well, I mean, you touched on education.
Yeah,
I've seen it on both ends of the
yeah,
scale, right? I saw a story recently, and I don't remember where it was, if it was 60 Minutes or one of those, but they were talking about kids that really just didn't get it in the
yeah,
classroom,
yeah,
right? But then they would put on these virtual
yeah,
headsets, and they would teach a similar type
yeah,
approach to the lesson, but in a completely different
yeah,
environment. And just the brain chemistry
yeah,
changed with regards to these kids. And then counter to that, you have elderly folks that are in senior
yeah,
centers that have basically not shown any type of interest or true interaction, and then they put these headsets on and get into an immersive environment, and it's like their brain chemistry just
yeah,
explodes.
yeah. Um, yeah. So I'll tell you about, like, one of the coolest projects I ever worked on was with a young college instructor over in the UK, and he taught young adults like 18 to 25, let's say, who were on the autism spectrum. And he came to me one time and he said, "Listen, my school has given me," and this is probably going back probably about 7, 8 years now, 9 years, a while ago. He said, "My school gave me a little room that we can set up as like a safe room, where if someone is just having a tough day, is overstimulated, whatever, they just need to like chill out and relax. They can go to this room, and that in of itself isn't anything new, but what made it really cool was that he was my friend Daniel was and still is a huge Disney fan. So and he had seen me I think on social media or somewhere on LinkedIn maybe,
Yeah.
and he reached out to me. He knew I was former Imagineer, and he said, explained to me that he had been given this room, and he started to kind of decorate it with images and actually little props that he made from the Disney movie Inside Out, which was wonderful with all the
Oh,
different
wow.
emotions, right? Which was
Yep.
perfect. So he called me up and he kind of told me all this, and he said, but I was wondering, as an Imagineer, is there anything more that maybe you could give me some tips or tricks? And as it so happened, he's a big Disney fan. Like I said, and he comes over maybe once a year, so maybe a couple times a year. And it just so happened that he was going to be coming over within the next month or so. And so I'll tell you what, when you come over, let's go. I'll take you into the park and we'll walk through the Magic Kingdom. And I want to show you how Imagineers tap into all the different senses. And, we'll get some ideas and maybe brainstorm. So we did that. And to make a long story short, when he went back, we collaborated and he took all of these things that I was talking about and start to put them in that room. And the thing that's amazing about it is that, obviously working for a small college, he didn't have a budget. And I speak to teachers all the time. I zoom into their classrooms from Disney. And, the one thing that I try and tell them is that, with a little creativity and innovation, you can create amazing immersive environments. So what Daniel did in his safe room was kind of took that to the next level where, we talked about colored lights and, how much does it cost to go down to like a hardware store and buy, party lights that are green or yellow or blue, right?
Yep.
And now with LEDs, it's even easier. We talked about using
Yep.
scents, and obviously didn't have big scent machines, but you can go and buy like the Glade plugins, or things like that to give off different scents. We talked about audio, projection mapping. All of these things, can be done very, very simply and cheaply, and he built them all in. And a lot of it he had connected like through Bluetooth, and just with his phone, was able to like, start music or customize the lighting, even black lighting to make certain things glow. He took it in the center of the room. There was like this big ugly column that just was, when the room was built, I guess they had to build around it, but he wrapped it to look like a tree and then took and Velcroed like little plush animals on there. So because some people, they get comfort from that tactile softness,
Yeah.
right? Some people get from the audio, some from the lighting. So the room could just be adjusted anyway to suit their needs. It was a wonderful project, and that to me is I think a great example of how immersive environments can like cross pollinate into different ways.
I
Yeah,
love that. Well, so let's go back a
yeah,
bit. Obviously, one of the things that I was most
yeah,
excited about was to talk about your time at Disney as an
yeah.
Imagineer, right? And you've been able to take since your time there, move that into a couple of very unique directions, and I want to definitely spend time there. But tell us a little bit. I'm always fascinated about the origin story. What led you to the path as being an Imagineer, and
Oh my gosh.
what can you tell us about what an Imagineer does day to day?
Okay, well, so I'll kind of start with that and then work backwards when the magic cut because there's
Okay,
still, to my surprise anyway, a lot of people who are not familiar with Disney Imagineering or what the Imagineers are. There's a wonderful, any of you folks out there, if you have Disney Plus, a wonderful series on there called The Imagineering Story. I highly recommend it.
it's
That kind
really
of, yeah,
good. Yes.
tells a story. But basically, Disney Imagineers, that's the team that is tasked with conceptualizing and developing all of the rides and attractions and environments within the Disney theme parks. and beyond theme parks now on our cruise ships and resorts and places like that. You've got the word itself is a hybrid of imagination and engineering. So you put those together, you get
Yep.
Imagineer or Imagineering. And Imagineers, there are probably about 30 different, 50 different job titles that fall under that umbrella. On
Wow.
one side, you've got the very uh, engineering focused side, right? The technical folks that design the ride systems and the
Yep.
roller coaster tracks and that kind of stuff. But then you've got the other side, which is the all the creative side, which is all the painters and artists and myself as a writer, things like that. So that's kind of Imagineering. And as I say, everything kind of starts with that story that we want to
Yeah.
tell, and no matter which side you're on, the technical or the creative, that's where it starts, and what you use is your blueprint. Um, how I wound up with that motley crew, um, it seems like a lot of people have got really interesting stories. So I'll try and give you the short version of my story because I only know we have, like an hour or something. But for me, it began my first job when I got out of school. My degree was advertising, and I always thought I would be an advertising copywriter. I always loved to write; came very naturally to me. Was always creative as a kid. So I thought that'd be a fun.
So that just came naturally
Yeah,
to you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I thought being an advertising copywriter, I couldn't get a job at an ad agency doing that, but through a friend of mine, I was hired with a video production company in Miami as a script writer. And I didn't know a thing about video production, but I could write, so they hired me for that. And eventually I would go out and work with the producers and directors. And that's where I really kind of like learned how to do that. Eventually, became a producer and director in my own right. And
Wow.
eventually I was producing. I'm going to kind of age myself here. Hopefully, you have an older demographic listening, but um, so I was producing the in-flight entertainment programming for Eastern Airlines, which used to be, big major airline, kind of like Delta
Yeah. Yeah.
is today. But then Eastern went
You
bankrupt.
honestly don't look old enough to have been associated with Eastern
Oh, for
Airlines. So
crying out loud! You're too kind. Probably older than you. I'm now. I'm getting used to being like the oldest guy in the room. It's kind of sad. Um, but
but you were writing for the in-flight camera. Sorry, I didn't mean to
yeah, no,
interrupt
no,
you,
no,
but
no, no. So anyway, so yeah, so I was doing that. Eastern Airlines went bankrupt, and this
yeah.
was in the late 1980s. And so, here I am a year out of school. Uh, just had my first job, great job, got laid off. It's like welcome to the world, Brian
Oh,
Collins. So uh, I thought, well, my brother lived in Orlando, so I moved up here. I thought Disney was getting ready at that time to open what was then the Disney MGM Studios. Right now, it's Disney
yeah.
Hollywood, but when it first opened up, it was Disney MGM Studios, and it was very much a very active production studio. We had backlots in a New York street and carpentry shop and costuming and all the infrastructure that a film crew would need, a film company would need. Wonderful sound stages. So I thought, well, maybe I'll move up here. They'll take one look at my resume and they'll, you know, take me to that nice corner office and how's that view of the castle, and what can we get you for lunch, Mr. Collins? And it didn't quite work out that way. They did hire me, but they hired me to work at the front desk of the Contemporary Resort. And
Well, everybody's got to start somewhere,
Steve
right?
Jobs was very famous for saying, you can never connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And I sure as heck cannot connect dots looking forward at that point.
Yeah.
But looking back, it actually was a wonderful place for me to begin my Disney career because that's where I learned everything about customer service and the Disney culture
Yep.
and why they're so esteemed at what they do. And after about 3 months, which was the minimum amount of time you have to work where you're hired into, I was able to kind of start uh, bouncing around the company and picking up little jobs in other departments that were relevant to my field. So, to make a long story short, I met someone who was a full time production assistant at the studios, and we hit things off great. And he started to bring me out to work with him, and eventually they started giving me my own projects as a production assistant. So I did that, and then I would maybe go over and work with our what's called cast communications. It's like corporate communications, writing stories for our company newspaper. I produced a couple training videos, things like that. I would work maybe with our marketing department when we had these big grand opening galas and things of that nature. So was really doing wonderful, and it was great in the sense that at that point I wasn't really having to work back at the contemporary anymore at the front desk. Um, but I still didn't really have a full time home. I was kind of like on loan to these other departments, and the hotel could have called me back technically anytime, if they felt like they needed to. One thing about Disney is that I had great bosses and supervisors. They supported me. They were happy I was able to do this other stuff. But, at the end of the day, they were still having to pay my benefits and everything. Um,
Yeah.
so I was desperately trying to like apply for internal positions, and every so often I would apply for something, and I would see something called like a show writer for Disney Imagineering, and I'm thinking, I could write, how hard could that be, and how hard can Imagineering be? So I thought, yeah, great, perfect. So I applied 3 times and got rejected 3 times. And the last time it was so the last time I applied that they reached out to me. They said, "Okay, Brian, we think we have a position opening up for you. We're going to fly out to California, to Glendale, where the headquarters are. We'll talk to you. Let's see if this is a good fit." And about 2 weeks before I'm supposed to hop on the plane and go, I get an email saying, "Oh, we're sorry, but the position's been frozen. I cannot let
Oh.
it go. Sorry. Position's been frozen. Hang tight. You're on our radar. We'll get back to you." So what I did next, I always tell my students, don't do this. It was a very, very bad idea. But I actually made a ransom note, and I like cut like little like yeah letters out. It's a true story. Letters out from like magazines. I pasted them down, and the ransom note said, "Want to be a Disney Imagineer, holding corporate symbol as hostage, willing to negotiate." And then I went out. It gets better. Gets better. I went out. I bought, the traditional black Mickey Mouse hats, with the ears and stuff. I bought
Yeah.
one of those, and I ripped off one of the ears, and I put the severed ear in an envelope with the ransom note, and I mailed it to my HR person. And I'm thinking, any day now, I'm gonna hear like at 3 in the morning knocks at my door, and they're gonna be, like men in like dark suits and glasses. "Mr. Collins, come with us, please. We need to talk to you." Um, but
Walt Disney sends the
yeah,
black
right.
helicopters, right?
Black Ops from Disney.
Yeah, that's
So, fortunately, I will say I did know the person I was sending it to. We did have a little bit of an established relationship, but still, it was a little bit risky. And I knew,
it was a risk. I mean,
it
you
could
got
have
to
gone
take the
either
you got
way.
to
Fortunately, it went the
throw the
right
dice
way.
occasionally.
And that's kind of what opened up my door to kind of help me get the interview and, talked about. creative director here in Florida, and get hired on as a show writer. And yeah,
And the rest is
the
history,
rest
as
is
they say,
history, as they say. Yeah.
right?
So
That's awesome. I mean, obviously, to get their attention, you had to think outside the
yeah,
box, which is what a
yeah,
creative guy
yeah.
does. Like you said, you tell your students probably not the way to get in your foot in the
No,
door
no,
today.
no. Yeah,
Back then, though, we had a lot of flexibility. We did the same.
yeah.
I shut down an entire office complex one
Oh
time
Lord.
because I got creative with a little package
Well, well,
that I thought was a brilliant
yeah, right.
idea, and they thought it was a
Yeah,
bomb's.
yeah.
You and I have that in common, I guess.
I
So,
was the kid when I was like in high school that was in the back of the chemistry lab, putting like pennies in the sulfuric acid, watching all the green smoke, and all of a sudden it's like, they're clearing us out of the room. So it's like, okay, well, I didn't know it was hazardous.
Brian's back to his old
Yeah.
tricks, right? Well, what was the best part of being an Imagineer, in your
Hmm.
opinion?
Um, I think for me, the best part of being an Imagineer was probably, and this sounds like really cliche, but I would say the people I worked with. Um, at that level, you're just working with some insanely talented people. Um, people. We were a smaller team here in Orlando back then. Everyone, just really enjoyed their jobs, and enjoyed working with each other. Um, and being able to kind of like leave a legacy, of entertainment. I didn't really ever stop to think too much about how big or how big the audience was, or how lasting. I mean, writing for a Disney attraction, if you you could get paralyzed if you stop and think about the ramifications of that and the impact that it has. But
Yeah.
I was always so well supported by my colleagues, and my boss, who had the same very bad punny sense of humor that I did. Um, I, so
I mean, there's a possibility Brian Collins' humor is being done on a Jungle Cruise right now, right?
there's definitely a few jokes that have survived the ages, and not too much, not too much, but there's a few, and whenever I go out there, I always make sure to stop by and chat with the Jungle Cruise skippers and all that. I actually was doing a tour out there with some folks, taking them to the park and showing it to them, like from an Imagineering perspective, and we went by the Jungle Cruise, and the skipper's boat that we got on actually was one of my students at UCF, which was really kind of fun. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome. Well, so let's talk about that for a second. You parlayed that experience into an actual experience for individuals and companies called WD with
yes,
me, which I love the
yeah,
name,
yeah.
right? And it's a behind the scenes tour of Walt Disney World. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, what I'll do is I'll take people on. I don't call them tours because they're not really a tour. I call them
Okay.
strolls. So I'll take them on a
A
stroll
stroll.
through
Okay.
any of the Disney theme parks, and basically we what I do is I try and show them the parks from a very different perspective than maybe what they're used to. I try and show it to them through the eyes of an Imagineer. So I talk about all the architecture and the design and the audio and the colors, and point out different little like Easter eggs within the park, and certainly can't do that without showing off a hidden Mickey or two. But it's really we
There's like a whole cult dedicated just to
yeah,
that,
yeah,
right?
there's
You know,
absolutely
yeah,
100%. Yeah, so we don't really spend time going on like rides and stuff. So it's not the best
sure.
thing to do if this is like your first time at the park. But if you've been to the park a few times and you're looking for a different perspective, or if you're a real fan of Imagineers and Imagineering,
Yeah.
I get lots of moms and dads, parents that will book a tour for their kid, who has always dreamt of wanting to be an Imagineer. So those are always fun. And then I also people can also, if they don't want to do a tour, they can book like a dinner with an Imagineer
Okay.
kind of thing, and same kind of thing. I was very very lucky that I was probably one of the last generations of Imagineers to be able to worked with and met, more met than worked with, to be honest, but a little bit of work with some of like the original Imagineers that worked hand in hand with Walt to create the classic
Yeah.
attractions, like Mark Davis
Oh,
and Raleigh Crump and John Hench, which names that may not mean anything to a lot of people, but if you're a
if you see a
Disney,
documentary, they
yeah,
definitely mean
yeah,
something.
if you're a
Yeah.
Disney aficionado, you certainly know those names, and these guys were always just so generous. They would come and spend time with you and tell you stories, yeah, and sometimes very very funny stories, and just kind of like pass it down. And I mean that's what I try and do now. To for my students and for the folks I take through the parks.
Yeah,
It's a lot of fun.
I think the tour with you, and I definitely want to take it when I come
Yeah,
out there, or the
yeah,
stroll. I think is really unique in that you are helping people see it through like you said, a different lens, a different
yeah.
perspective, but just the amount of creativity and the effort that goes towards the experience. Like we all know the front facing
Right.
stuff, but how that becomes what it
Yeah,
becomes, whether it's a ride or an attraction, there's a like you said, it all starts with the story. What are we trying to
yeah.
accomplish here? What are we trying to have that 5-year-old kid or that 50-year-old
Right.
dad experience when they come to this part
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
park? And that part I just absolutely am
yeah.
enamored with, because the amount of, and it kind of ties into your, I don't want to talk about your other venture, but the level of creativity and brainstorming that is really required in order to do
Yeah,
that is really super
yeah,
inspiring.
yeah. One of the biggest compliments I'll get is when I've taken someone through the park and they'll look at me afterwards and they'll say, I've been here like a million times, but I never, saw some of the things that you showed me, or I never knew some of the things that you told me about. And, to me, that just kind of like tickles my heart, to kind of hear
Oh
that.
yeah.
So I keep waiting, that I'm going to get like called out someday of being like, oh, you fraud, but hasn't happened yet. So
Well, it won't happen because of this show, I can assure you. Well, so talk a little bit. Well, I mean, before we actually move on
yeah,
to your other company,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you what led you to leave Disney.
Wasn't my choice. So Disney is a very like a project oriented part of the company, right? Because we
Yeah,
conceptualize and build and maintain the attract not really maintain but build the attractions and all that. And in my case, the staff it can be very cyclical where they'll scale up and scale down. And as I was joining, they were building not only the Disney MGM Studios, and that was wrapping up, but then they were building Disneyland Paris,
yep.
Euro Disney at the time, and they hired a bunch of people to go over there and work on that. And after that park opened, then they were going to be rolling over right into their next park, which was going to be Disney MGM Studios Paris. And it was like, ready to go. And after Euro Disney first opened up, if people have remember the history or studied the history, there were a lot of issues that happened with that
Yeah.
park in terms of cultural issues and other things like that. And the park took a little while to kind of find its footing and get an audience over there. So because the attendance wasn't as strong as they had hoped, and I think they needed to kind of work through some of these other issues. That whole second gate, the Disney MGM Studios Europe was kind of like put on the back burner and put on ice. And
Yeah.
the idea was that, all these Imagineers that worked on the first park would just kind of roll over and start working on the second one. But, that work just went away. And so they just have large layoffs in the company. And unfortunately, I wasn't with them long enough. I was still kind of like a low man on the totem pole. And even though I wasn't
Yeah.
working over there, it was a company wide thing. So, I certainly don't hold any kind of like resentment or anything like that. It was certainly very, um, I was crushed at the time. Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't be?
Yeah.
As a 20-some-year-old kid, having the time of my life. But it I've just gone on to just have an amazing career, and not one that I could have ever planned or anything like that. And again,
Yeah. I mean,
connecting
looking at your
those dots
resume, it's
backwards.
incredibly. Yeah, I mean, you've got an impressive work history in organizations,
Right.
board positions that you've been a part of. Obviously, you're teaching, but tell my audience a little bit about the Brainstorm Institute
So
because this thing really,
yeah,
has me excited.
yeah. So WD with me, I really kind of created that to kind of like leverage my background as an Imagineer, but way before that, before WD with me, not way before I was an Imagineer because I was a kid then, but I've always, I've always done like a little bit of consulting work on the side. And people ask me like now, are you still connected with Disney? And obviously, doing what I do and teaching what I teach, yeah. But I've always,
Mhm.
for the last 30 years, been had some kind of connection, kind of like being in the mafia, maybe you're never out. Um, so but I've always enjoyed doing like consulting work and that type of thing. And so I started kind of like my graduate degree. I have my master's degree in marketing, right? What's the story you want to tell? So I created the
Yeah,
Brainstorm Institute, and that's basically my consulting side of my practice, where uh, I've worked with different companies to obviously pull them together to do like facilitate brainstorming sessions. I've actually done a couple, which I'd love to do more, where I actually have brought teams here to Orlando, and we'll do maybe a charrette or brainstorming or whatever it might be, some workshops. But then I'll take them into the Disney parks and kind of connect the dots, because there's amazing ways you can do. I do that with educators as well this summer. I'm actually with two other wonderful educators where we have a conference that we're registering people now for, where we take teachers and we do the same thing. They come here and
oh, that's awesome.
focus on professional development, and we take them into the parks to connect the dots, and it's really a wonderful thing. So, and it's given me a chance also to really like travel and give some keynotes and speeches and workshops. I have one in particular. It's called the five components of your Walt Disney DNA. That I talk about what makes each of us creative, and
Yeah.
all of that. So it's yeah, that's just kind of like my branding for my consulting work.
Well, the powerful thing I think about brainstorming, we talk a lot about it
Yeah,
in my community for the Ripple, is how important creativity is to almost every aspect of what
yeah,
you do, right? When I talk about the Ripple and the process of connecting with another human being, to be creative and you have to be creative in order to keep that connection alive
yeah,
and continue to develop and grow the
yeah,
relationship. But when you think about the work you do as you take it out into the corporate
yeah,
environment, that's how innovation and creativity really becomes
yeah,
monetized, right? And
yeah,
so a lot of times, you can throw a bunch of people in a room and say, go come up with the next XYZ product.
right,
And it's not likely to happen because there's not that stimulus. There's not
yeah,
that, someone like yourself that's kind of coaching them through the process.
yeah,
And you can't just be creative on a dime,
no, yeah,
right? It has to be cold out of you, and it has to be sort of a process put into place or put into action to be able to
yeah,
make it happen. And that's why looking at the work you've done, that really impressed me, because I think that's one of the things that you bring to the table so well for an
yeah,
organization,
yeah.
is to say, hey, let's just not sit in a room. Let's tease this out, but let's do it through experience. Let's do it through
Well,
understanding of the problem, or, the approach that we're looking for from a design element.
you were talking earlier a little bit about brain science, and there's so much of that that goes into the process.
Yep.
And I'm not going to sit here and say that brainstorming the process isn't fun, and the workshops and going into Disney isn't fun. I mean, it certainly is, but there's got to be a method to the madness. You have to understand what the strategy is, and why you're doing those things. So it's not about just going into the parks and let's go on a scavenger hunt and have fun. It's real. It really is like connecting those dots and then coming back afterwards and debriefing, and being able to take people through that process. It's and sometimes you'll get groups that don't necessarily think of themselves as creative, but you do that and then you see the little light bulbs going off, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's wonderful. I'm going to kind of give a shameless plug, but I'm just finishing up my first book now, which hopefully is going to be published uh, before the end of this year, hopefully.
Oh,
Yeah,
congratulations. That's
so I'm
exciting.
kind of shopping around some different publishers right now, see if I get some bites. But it's called Creative Cross Pollination, a former Imagineer's take on the innovation process. And basically, cross pollination is a term. Creative cross pollination is a term that I've kind of latched onto, that describes what I truly believe is a very innate process in all of us as human beings, that every one of us has, and we've had since we were writing on the walls of our caves, right? Back
Yeah.
in those days, being able to take two things that don't seem to have anything to do with each other, put them together to solve a solution. And once you understand how to cross pollinate, and you become aware that you're doing it, or you intentionally set out to do it, it can lead to some really profound, innovative breakthroughs. So I've got some different techniques and things like that, which I share, and I actually have a whole one of the chapters of my book is just a cross section of people from every walk of life, who have given me, one or two pages examples of how they have used creative cross pollination in their life. So
Oh, that's
um,
great.
I guess the point is though that there's really is definitely a lot of um, science and strategy that goes into that whole brainstorming cross pollination process. To get these breakthrough ideas. So, yeah,
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on the new book. I
yeah,
can't wait to read it when it comes
yeah,
out.
me neither.
Having produced a book, I'm in the third edition of mine. I know
Yeah,
it's a heavy lift, but
yeah,
once it's
yeah,
out,
yeah.
it'll be like, Katie bar the door, because
I
I think you're already in demand anyway. But I think once you get the book out there, it's gonna, raise
uh,
your profile so
yeah,
much more.
yeah. It's
Well, one of the things I like to do on these podcasts is I have this thing called Ripple Connection questions that I ask to
sure.
give my audience a little bit more insight as to who you are as an individual.
Oh,
So, if you don't mind, just kind of rapid
sure,
fire. Well,
sure.
just see what comes of it. What did the 7-year-old Brian want to be when he
An
grew up?
astronaut. That's easy.
Really?
Let me think about that. An
Yeah.
astronaut. I tell everyone that. As a kid growing up down in South Florida, and again, just aging myself here, uncontrollably, but watching the first, the Apollo rockets lift off up the coast from us, and it was. I was always enamored and terribly loved, the space program and astronauts. I thought that'd be the coolest thing, and strap me in, I'll be off this planet in 2 seconds. I ask my students, and I'm surprised how many of them say, "Nah, not for me," but in a heartbeat. And one of the things, and I'll kind of say this before we go into your next question real quick, but one of the things that I always tell my students is that I've never defined my career by the company I work for or where I want to, you know, I've defined my career by looking at what my skill set is and what I know I'm good at, what I can do, and how I can, going back to that cross pollination theme, but how I can cross pollinate
Yep.
that into companies I'd like to work for, companies or you know things that I think would be cool in life. And the tie into your question is that after I got out of college and when I moved on from Imagineering, for example, I went back into corporate video production and. Again, to make a very long story short, I wound up being able to put myself in the position where I would go out to NASA when they were like launching the space shuttles, and I probably saw a half dozen or so shuttle launches live from the
Wow.
Cape. I watched one of them go up from the roof of the vehicle assembly building, and got to
Wow.
meet and interview astronauts, and so don't limit yourself by thinking you want to work. People always ask me, how do I become an Imagineer? And I always tell them, especially kids, and my students, I tell them, don't worry about being an Imagineer. Tell me what you're passionate about, and you follow your passion. That's what's going to take you and make you happy. So
Oh
anyway,
yeah. I I read that about in one of the articles when I was researching that you had said is I have a favorite saying for my students. It's that if you do the same thing as
yeah,
everyone else, you're just going to be like everyone
yeah,
else, and you don't want to be like
right.
everyone
That's my
else.
mantra.
I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a great
thank you.
one. What's your superpower?
What's my superpower? Um, I think I'm able to connect and communicate with people from all walks of life, all levels of business, I'm just very, I've just been given, I guess, the gift of gab. Thank you, Mom. Um, and I think being able to just, have a conversation and adjust, to who I'm speaking to. His always in different cultures. I'm very involved. I believe very strongly in giving back in charity. Being Jewish,
Love
we
that.
have a saying, Tikkun Olam, which is kind of like a philosophy that has to do with basically it translates to make the world a better place, right? Give back to the world, and that's very important to me. And I got very involved with our Islamic community here. I've been involved with so many just cross-cultural kind of things, and um, it's something that is enjoyable to me. And I think makes you a richer, better person. And I've tried to bring my kids up and teach them, and certainly they've embraced that kind of outlook too. I wish there was more of that in this world,
Yeah,
boy,
I do too.
especially
But
these days.
y- yeah, clearly the way that you're doing it, you're inspiring the next generation. So good on
Yeah,
you. I think that's
yeah.
awesome. Who inspired you to become who you are today?
Um, Thinking, that's a great question, and I've thought about that. I think there are two people when I was younger that really kind of inspired me to maybe be the person who I am. The first would be my mom's sister. I had an Aunt Janice who passed away many years ago already. But growing up as a kid, we would go visit her, and she was always so creative, and I always just love that about her. Um, always just a very creative thinker and person, and uh, always certainly encouraged me. And then my mom, and mom, you're getting a lot of kudos today. You listening up there? So my dad, always encouraged me to. My dad was an attorney, so I don't know if my mom and dad, even after I became an Imagineer, if they ever really knew what I did. Kind of. My mom was a travel agent, and they traveled the world together. But my mom was always just had, the most amazing, bright outlook on life. Anything is possible, and you know, don't sweat the small stuff, and all those
Yep.
kinds of things that I think now, have taught me to kind of just live and be like a very balanced, you know, yin yang kind of person, spiritual, however you want to define it. But I think I got so much of that just, from my mom, of course. So,
I love
um,
that. Those are sound like two amazing people
so,
to inspire you
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, I miss them both.
What's I mean, obviously you have the opportunity to impart your wisdom on a day-to-day basis with the students and the people that meet you through
Yeah,
your professional work. But what's the best piece of advice you would want to share with everybody that, you can put it on a billboard out there anywhere for people to see on a daily basis? What would it be?
yeah. If you do the same thing as everyone else, you're just going to be like everyone else. So don't be like everyone else. Um,
Yeah, I just walked into that. I should have known that was going to be
I mean, really,
it.
the advice I would give people is don't be limited by your own paradigms of who you think you are or where you think you should be going. Do that soul searching many times throughout your life, and you know, take notes about who you are and what's making you happy. Um, how many people do we all know that go to jobs that they just don't like, they're not happy at, they settle for? And we all do that throughout our life, unless you're incredibly lucky. But 99% of people probably are not. And at some point, you kind of have to do that. But I'm not talking about the job you're in. I'm talking about like how you're forming your career and your life.
Yep,
Um, Look at what makes you happy, and it may not always make you rich. It may cause you from being rich to being poor, or it could
yeah,
go the other way, hopefully.
yeah.
But just be true to yourself. Um, that's what I would say, and be
That's good
different.
advice for
Just be
sure.
different. Find what makes you unique, and play on that.
I love that. What has, in your experience, been the best thing about moving towards and being an entrepreneur?
Hmm. For me, it's I think just the variety of stuff you get to do. Especially for me, I mean, listen, I've got ADD, like horribly, and it's not always easy, when you're dealing with something like that, to stay focused and everything. Over time, you kind of learn how to manage it and everything. But um, I love the variety of projects, the different kinds of people I get to meet. Always learning something new. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
60 plus years old now, I'm learning, still learning and excited to learn new stuff. And that's just so much fun for me.
that's awesome. I love that. Well, last two
Yeah.
questions. What does the ripple effect mean to you when you think about the term?
Um, I love the term because I'm ripped. Um, so to me, ripple effect, I think it's like you said, you toss that stone in the water, and not only do you know how far and wide those ripples are going to go that you've created, um, they're different, with each stone's toss. Um, they're different shapes. It's, to me, just I think a beautiful part of the organicness and the nature, that we live on this little blue dot, that's spinning around the planet, around the sun.
Yep.
I think that's why so many astronauts come back from space changed. Once you've kind of seen that, how can you not? And we're all connected one way or another. You know, uh, I even had people in my own family when I was. I helped start create like the first Muslim scout troop in our area. When my kids were younger, they were in Boy Scouts, and so that meant Dad was in Boy Scouts, and so I helped create the first Islamic scout troop, and even people in my own community and my own family were like, you're Jewish. I don't get it, and I'm like, I don't get what you don't get. It's like we're all. I mean, the
Yeah.
first time I went to go talk to them about starting up a troop, it was like soccer moms, watching their kids. It's
Yep.
we all, especially here in America, um, we all want the same thing for ourselves and for our kids, and to be happy and be able to have the freedom to express ourselves. Um, so it's that's what those ripples I think are all about.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, what ripple can I create for you?
What ripple can you create for me? You don't get a publisher out there that wants to take out a good book,
Okay.
or an agent. um, just speaking to you has been, wonderful. I appreciate
Thank you.
having the ability to hopefully, speak to some new folks. Go visit my websites. Come visit me if you come to Florida. Come, go
Yeah,
www.com.
well, speaking of that, what are your websites? That with everybody, and we'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well.
Well, since you're asking,
Yeah.
so for the tours and dinners and Disney side of me, there's WD with me, WDWITHME, WDwithme.com. My consulting side is Brainstorm Dash Institute. You have to put that hyphen in between the two words, but brainstorm-institute.com. Definitely find me on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn. Let me know you heard me on the show. Um, uh, what else? I'm on Instagram, creative one, with the number eight, CRE8, VE, creative one. I've got two Facebook pages. I've got the Mouse and the Imagineer, so follow me on there. And if you're a
Okay.
teacher,
I like.
I have Educators Who Love Disney is our Facebook page, and there's also Imagineering.com, Imagineering.net,
Okay.
for teachers. And either there or the Facebook page. If you guys are interested in like learning more about this conference we have coming up this summer, it's a little boutique conference. We're capped at 20 people, but you can still register if you want to do that. Um, and what else? One more website I'll give a plug to, which is the ENSO Institute, ENSO Education Institute. So
Okay.
ensoeducation.com. The ENSO Education Institute is a little think tank that I created with two other educators in California. And basically, what we do with ENSO is ENSO is a Japanese symbol that goes back to samurai days, and there's a lot of meaning to it. But the Enso Education Institute was created to look at ways that we might be able to disrupt education, and we hold base camps in different environments
Oh,
around the country and sometimes even around the world. We were in Dubai for the big expo. We're planning to go to Japan next year, 26, for the big
wow.
expo. But we do like small ones. One convenes here in Orlando at the theme parks. We did one up in the Great Lakes area that was all on the outdoors. And it's all about getting people in these different environments and um, taking time to think about how we can take what we're learning in those environments and again cross pollinate that into education to disrupt it or change it or make it better. So
Oh,
it's a
that's
wonderful
great.
initiative. So one or two ways
Well,
to
yeah,
find
well,
me.
we'll get links up for all of
Yeah,
that. I mean, I mean, I appreciate all of those resources and encourage our listeners and those that'll watch this on YouTube to be sure to check those resources out. We'll have them in the show notes. And Brian, let me just say
thank
thank you so much for the time. You've been so great to engage with me and to set this up. I've been really, really impressed. I was super thrilled when you said you'd do the
you.
show, and I knew that you'd have a lot of insightful things to share with my audience, and I'm so grateful to know
Yeah,
you.
well, I've been looking forward to this as well. I did my homework on you
Well,
too, buddy. You know, your name's pretty good out there.
oh, well, good. I'm glad I passed the
So
test.
yeah, so no, it's been a
Well,
pleasure
I
speaking.
look forward. I know we've got more to talk about at some point, so I we'll definitely have to do this
Yeah,
again, and we'll have to get together just
we'll have to
offline
do
because
one
I
in the
definitely could.
parks. You'll have to come down here. You know, if you have
I
to
would
write
love
off
that. That would be
a
great. Let's
business
do it.
trip to Disney, you know, now you have an excuse.
Absolutely, I'm in. Well, listen, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you for being part of this episode with us. Be sure to check out Brian's links, and we'll be back with another episode of the Ripple Effect podcast again very soon.
Fantastic.